Hello, I'm Michelle Swan Young. I'm so glad you're joining me today. We're going to be talking about how we can interrupt the stress response when we do notice that it's starting to rise in us. So I have a couple questions to kind of start out with. What do you do when you do notice that you're starting to feel stressed, or you notice that these emotions are rising and maybe beginning to feel like they might become out of control? Just think about that for a moment. Do you ever notice that your thoughts are trying to talk you back down, or maybe insist that you get it together? If you do try to sort of talk yourself down, or if that talk that's happening inside your head, your self-talk, is saying like, just calm down, how often does it work that those thoughts actually help you to calm down? And if it doesn't usually work, then what typically happens to you instead? So I think for many of us, when we start to have our emotions rise, we do get this voice in our head that says, just calm down, you just hold it together, you just be fine. And we try to kind of contain those emotions. And oftentimes, maybe sometimes that works, especially kind of if you're at a lower level, that might work sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't work at all, and it actually just makes you more and more and more frustrated. And I wanted to talk today about this interrupting the stress response, and talk a little bit more about like what's actually happening in our brains and our bodies when we're starting to feel these emotions rise. So the one big idea for this is that turning on calm is actually much easier than turning off stress once that stress response is on. We can think about our brain in a really simple way. We're going to think about having two brains. Clearly, this is not actually true, but just as a model, we're going to work with the model of us having kind of two brains. We have this frontal cortex, this thinking brain, and then our limbic system, which actually includes parts that are not technically our brain. That's more of our feeling system. And the limbic system actually controls a lot of things that aren't just emotions, but that's what we're going to be focusing on right now. And our thinking brain is really good at triggering our limbic system to have a stress response. However, once the limbic system is in stress response, the thinking brain is not terribly good at telling the limbic system to turn off. But there are other ways that we can tap into our limbic system to tell it to turn off, which can then help the brain also calm down. The thinking brain can help it calm down a little bit as well. So that's kind of a very general idea of kind of what's happening in the brain. We can also think about our autonomic nervous system. So our ANS, our autonomic nervous system, is the thing that controls our organs and everything where we don't have conscious control of. Our autonomic nervous system controls those things. So like our heart rate, our perspiration, our digestion, these sorts of things. So similarly to thinking about having two brains, you can make a very big generalization and think about your ANS as having two nervous systems. One is your sympathetic nervous system, and that is the one that sort of regulates, triggers a stress response. It's the one that often is called the fight, flight, or freeze nervous system. And then your other nervous system is the parasympathetic nervous system, which is called oftentimes rest and digest. And that one is the one that sort of regulates things when it's just in typical ordinary moments. Nothing is requiring or needing a stress response. And so when we're thinking about those two, they're actually like different nerves in our bodies that are part of these two different sections of the autonomic nervous system. And thinking about the nervous system, we can turn on the calm by engaging that parasympathetic side of the nervous system. So for example, the vagus nerve is part of the parasympathetic nervous system, and the bottom section of that nerve is kind of under our belly button. And so when we take really deep breaths and expand those lower lobes of our lungs underneath that section of our belly button, then that is stimulating the vagus nerve, which is part of the parasympathetic rest and digest nervous system, which sends a message to our whole bodies and our brains to calm back down, to come back into that calm state rather than the stress state. So as you can see, there is definitely a good reason to use our bodies to help us to calm down rather than trying to use our thoughts. And our thoughts are fantastic, like I said, at turning on stress, but just not so fantastic at turning it back off. So I hope this has helped you to understand a little bit more about why we're going to use these body-centered tools, why deep breathing helps, for example, and why other body-centered tools can really help to interrupt that stress response and bring us into a more calm state. I hope you have a wonderful day and take very good care.